Are Jews responsible for Monday's big holiday? From where does the Messiah come? And what's the right way to speak truth to power? We'll explore all of this on Jews Did It First. Hi there, this is Rabbi Yossi Madvig, and you're listening to Jews Did It First. I'm really excited because in the last few weeks, the number of listeners has gone up by about 10%. That's great news. Please tell your friends, share the podcast on Facebook and Twitter, like the Facebook page, all of that good stuff. Also, I'd love to hear your feedback. Leave a review. Let me know that there's a particular thing that Jews did first that you'd like to know more about, or something interesting that you'd like to know if Jews did it first. And finally, since we're supposedly in that giving season, please donate to support our efforts at jewishoswego.org/Jews Did It First. It will not only support the podcast, but it will also help connect the Jewish youth at SUNY Oswego to their eternal heritage. This week, it seems appropriate to mention the elephant in the room, as it were, and that is Christianity in general, and the Messiah in particular. I think it's pretty well known that Christianity started as a Jewish movement. In fact, nowadays you actually have a movement making its way through many branches of Christianity, and that's the Hebrew Roots movement. This is basically a hat tip to the Jewish foundation of the Christian religion. It expresses itself in things like having a Passover Seder in church, using Hebrew expressions, learning Hebrew, other such practices like that. Perhaps the prime example of this is, quote-unquote Messianic Judaism, which is basically a Christian movement which incorporates a lot of Jewish practices. I'm not sure which came first exactly, the Messianic Judaism or the Hebrew Roots movement, but it really doesn't matter. The point is that even Christians themselves attest to, and proudly so in many cases, the Jewish core of Christianity. Now, once upon a time, one could have said that the main difference between these two religions was only a matter of degree, not of kind. They were both essentially Judaism, but one believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and the other didn't. I would say that this was probably the case for the first, 150, 200 years, but once you hit the end of the 3rd century, and certainly by 325, beginning of the 4th century there, at the Council of Nicaea, when many things like the Trinity are declared as official church doctrine, then it's pretty clear that Christianity is its own kind of religion and not really any longer a Jewish movement. In fact, by the year 200 or so, you'd probably be hard-pressed to find many Jews believing in Jesus, whereas the opposite was true at the beginning of Christianity. You'd be hard-pressed to find any non-Jews. So, like I said, at first it was this idea that Jesus was the Messiah, whereas regular Jews felt no. In fact, when people say the word Messiah, they automatically think of Christianity. And they think, Son of God, divine being, virgin birth, all the stuff that people are celebrating at this time of year. But let's delve into this concept of what the Messiah is and where it came from. So, did you know that what we just talked about, this idea of what the Messiah is strictly a Christian view of the Messiah? In fact, the actual idea of the Messiah is a Jewish concept, but he isn't divine at all. So, since we, quote-unquote, invented the idea, how do we define it? Well, the word Messiah is actually a Greek transliteration of the Hebrew word Moshiach. Just Greek doesn't have an SH sound or a ch sound, so Moshiach becomes Messiah. That's also the same reason, by the way, the word Shabbat became Sabbath. There's no SH sound, so you can't say Shabbat, it's Sabbath. Okay. Anyway, the word Mashiach means anointed. That's what it means. The connotation there is anointed with oil. So that's why when we see the word used biblically, it always refers to either a Kohen, a priest who's working in the temple, or a king, as both of these people are anointed with oil as part of their initiation into their position. Now, the transition from a Messiah to the Messiah as an actual term to refer to the savior of the Jewish people, the future king, and so on, that was a later development, at least as far as literary references go. Obviously, there was always this concept of Mashiach. It's certainly described many times in the Bible. Isaiah in many places, Jeremiah in several places, Ezekiel in several places. The prophets are full of it. You even find hints of it in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses itself. But it's not, the person's not referred to as Moshiach. So the actual reference to that person being called Mashiach, that's a later invention that develops around maybe the 1st century BCE to, in the Midrashic works and so on. So that happens at a much later time. And the reason the Messiah is called by that moniker is because, as seen from many biblical references, he is a direct descendant and a rightful heir to the throne of King David. And since King David was a king, he was a Messiah, a Mashiach. He was anointed. And since the Messiah will also take his rightful place as king, he will also be anointed as part of that initiation. So, Christianity and Messiah. Christians can thank Jews for Monday's holiday, since, as we see, Jews did it first. And now, the counter-missionary. Since we're coming up on the celebration of the birth, literally, of Christianity, I figured we'd take a look at a passage in the Jewish Bible that Christian missionaries claim discuss this event. Now, the verse is Micah 5:1, or 5:2 in the Christian Bible. And the verse reads like this: You, Bethlehem, Ephratah, you are small among the clans of Judah, the tribe of Judah, and out of you will come for me a ruler over Israel, whose origins are from Yemei Olam. And we'll get into what that means in just a minute, that Yemei Olam. And there's essentially 2 parts to this passage. Part 1 is the message of a future ruler coming from Beit Lechem, or Bethlehem. And part 2 is the origin being from Yemei Olam. Now, with regards to Bethlehem, to Beit Lechem, what are we talking about? Actually, you don't have to guess. The verse tells you. This is a particular clan or a family, part of the tribe of Judah. And this is, in fact, where King David is from. Now, since this was written well after King David had ruled, we know it's talking about a future king that is a descendant of King David. And given the context of the section, it's indeed speaking of the Messiah. There's no argument there. This is definitely a messianic passage. However, this is discussing his tribe or his clan, not his physical birthplace. It's just telling you where amongst the Jewish people would you look for this person to be coming from. It has to be someone who is a descendant of King David, someone who has the same lineage as King David. Now, the second part is quite a piece of fancy theological footwork. As I mentioned, as Christianity developed, they moved away from the traditional Jewish understanding of the Messiah as a human king descended from King David to a divine being, God incarnate, as it were. Therefore, when discussing the origin of the Messiah, they do a tricky little turn of phrase here. You see, the phrase Yemei Olam means antiquity, or ancient days, days of old, or something like that. But the King James Version, not just the King James Version, actually changes the meaning. I'm probably basing this off of the Latin Vulgate translation. I think that's where the King James Version gets a lot of its stuff from. I'd have to look that up in particular. But we're going by the English version anyway, so it really doesn't matter. The King James Version changes this meaning to say eternity or everlasting, and many other Christian Bibles do that as well, which clearly gives the Messiah an eternal or divine quality that just doesn't exist in the Jewish Bible in the original Hebrew. Now, you might say, especially if you know a little Hebrew, Rabbi, we say things like L'olam va'ed, so, L'olam, it just means, it could mean eternity, so can't you just say that L'olam va'ed means, by the way, forever. So can't you just say that the different interpretations on what olam means, and the Jews choose one interpretation, the Christians choose another interpretation, what's the problem here? And the truth is that olam literally means world. So we're taking a word with a specific definition and using it idiomatically. The word means world. It doesn't have any reference to time, actually. It has a reference to place. But we're using it as an idiom. But that doesn't make the idioms malleable just because they use the same word or interchangeable. For example, I might say I feel under the weather, and that refers to a sickness. But if I say to weather the storm, it means to persevere. You can't just magically say that one means the other. And there's a simple test that we can do, as we've done in the past. How is this phrase translated elsewhere in the Jewish Bible? And funny enough, the King James Version itself translates Yemei Olam as days of old, not eternity, in no less than 5 times. It does it in Isaiah chapter 63, verse 9 and 11. It does it in Amos, chapter 9, verse 11. And my personal favorite over here, in Micah, the exact book that we're looking at, chapter 7, verse 14, just 2 chapters after the verse that we're looking at right now. And also does it again in Malachi, chapter 3, verse 4. So here we see, again, using the Jewish Bible to support the Christian missionary claims just doesn't seem to hold water. And now I'd like to share with you a Torah perspective in this week's Parsha about speaking truth to power. This week, Yehuda, Judah, approaches his brother Joseph, who is the second in command, the most powerful nation on earth. He doesn't know it's his brother. And how does Judah speak to him? Well, I've noticed 3 things that he does that I think are key when speaking truth to power, and I think it's missing a little bit in today's discourse. 1, he's very respectful. He constantly calls Joseph Sir or Lord. He doesn't go in flipping things over, beating people up, using vulgar language. He's very kind. He's very respectful. Number 2, he's very firm, and he doesn't back down. He's respectful, and he knows his position, and he knows where he stands. He stays true to his values and his convictions in a consistent manner. He doesn't move the goalposts. He doesn't say, well, this is what our values are, this is what we want to accomplish, and then start saying, well, but what about this? Whether that gets shot down, or even if you attain that, and then start, moving the goalposts, as it were, which I think a lot of people do in arguments, and especially when they're trying to get something, elicit something from their representatives or from their leaders. And finally, Judah lays out all of the facts. He starts from the beginning of their encounter from last week's Parsha, and he repeats back exactly what Joseph did and said, as well as the brothers' response to Joseph's requests and actions. He didn't hide any information. He didn't skew any information. He just told it like it is. And then, he said what he felt about that. But the facts were the facts. There was no disagreement on what the facts are, which I see this going on a lot in political discourse between the right and the left, where there seems to be a disagreement on the basic facts of the matter. And it's very hard to have a conversation and a discussion and a debate when you can't even agree on what the facts are, let alone how to interpret those facts. So what's the result? The leader of the most powerful civilization on earth breaks down, and they have a beautiful reconciliation, and it's just wonderful. And I really feel that all these 3 things are missing a lot in today's culture, as well as the political discourse. But it all has to be done with a recognition that underlies these 3 principles. that they are brothers, right? Joseph and Judah are brothers. If we can apply these three principles, these kindness, staying true to values, and represent the facts, then we can grow as a society. But only if we have that underlying recognition that we are all one people. We're all in the same boat, and we have the same end goal, to be the best people and the best country and the best community that we can. Thanks so much for listening. Shabbat Shalom.
Countless are your brains, you are the power that saves. Some days I take hours to pray, but even if my tongue was sweet and lips graceful, I would still